There's a type of person society often misunderstands. They're not weak, nor are they simply too sensitive. They are deep souls who perceive the world with open hearts and eyes that see the truth hidden behind every lie. They are the super empath. And if you've ever felt like you loved too deeply, forgave for too long, and still ended up hurt, then maybe you are one of them. In today's video, we'll embark on a journey to explore the paradoxical relationship between the super empath and the narcissist. This isn't just a story of pain and separation. It's a map leading to awakening, rebirth, and reclaiming the identity that's been manipulated for far too long. If you've ever felt confused in a toxic relationship, doubted yourself for being too kind, or found yourself trapped in a cycle of manipulation you couldn't explain, watch this video to the end. It might be the awakening moment you've been searching for. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button, turn on the notification bell, and join us in spreading messages of healing, recovery, and freedom. The journey begins with awareness, and this video is the first step. Part 1, Awakening in the Dark, the silent beginning of awareness. There are moments in life that don't arrive with a bang, but quietly, like a gentle breeze. No one around you notices that anything has changed, but within you, a door quietly creaks open. And that moment, fragile enough to go unheard by the world, marks the very first step on the awakening journey of a super empath. When others look at you, they see someone easily hurt, overly emotional, perhaps too kind. But they don't know that behind that softness lies a profound emotional intelligence, a raw instinctive sensitivity that few possess. You don't just feel the emotions of others, you absorb them, analyze them with each breath, and store away every tiny detail others overlook. That is not weakness. It is a form of nonverbal wisdom that transcends the ordinary. And because of that, you're often the first to sense that something is off in a relationship, even when everything seems fine on the surface. The irony is, this very gift of deep empathy makes you an ideal target for narcissists. They are drawn to your emotional depth, to your unguarded authenticity, but they do not love you. They crave the light within you, to use it, to control it, to reflect their distorted ego in it. To them, you are not a soul with intrinsic worth. You are a talking mirror, a tool to illuminate the false portrait they've created of themselves. At first, they seem to admire you. They call you different, rare, the only one who truly understands them. Those words soften your heart. You want to believe this is a wounded person who just needs the right kind of love. You offer your heart as a gift, believing that love can heal. But you don't realize you've just placed that heart in the hands of a master manipulator. At this stage, the narcissist is confident. They believe they've handled you, this soft one, the one too afraid to leave, the one who forgives unconditionally. They assume you're a puppet, not realizing you're a soul who observes, records, and analyzes every micro movement in their energy. You don't react explosively like others. You don't withdraw hastily, but you see, you feel, and you remember. Gradually begin to wonder, why am I always the one apologizing, even when I'm the one hurt? Why do I feel drained after every conversation, even when nothing seemed wrong? Why do I keep adjusting myself just to prevent them from getting angry? These questions don't arrive all at once. They seep through the cracks left behind by too many forgiven wrongs. And the moment you begin to question, that is when the narcissist starts losing control without even knowing it. You don't announce that you're leaving, you don't slam the door, but you pause. You look deeper at every behavior, every reaction. You begin to retreat internally, even if outwardly you're still smiling, you're still caring, still the same, but in truth, a part of you has stopped believing. And for someone who survives on being believed, this is the first sign of their impending collapse. The awakening of a super empath isn't a storm. It's an erosion. Day by day, week by week, the silence within you becomes clearer. You no longer need to understand them like you used to. You're no longer afraid of being alone. You stop clinging, stop explaining, stop trying to prove you're worthy of love. And this is what the narcissist never expects. You don't need to scream to leave. You don't need chaos to end things. Your power lies in quiet. While they scramble to create drama to regain control, you've already gently wrapped your heart and placed it somewhere safe within yourself. And this is what the narcissist never expects. You don't need to scream to leave. You don't need chaos to end things. Your power lies in quiet. While they scramble to create drama to regain control, you've already gently wrapped your heart and placed it somewhere safe within yourself. The narcissist won't realize this right away. They'll keep playing their old games, thinking you're still dependent. They'll still try to cast you in the role of the weak one who won't walk away. But the truth is, you've already been walking away for a long time. Walking away in your mind, walking away in your awareness. And when awareness shifts, your entire reality shifts too. When a super empath begins to truly see, every lie becomes transparent. Every performance looks cheap, and every invisible chain that once held you suddenly disappears. So if you're in the early stages of awakening, know that this is a sacred process. Don't rush it. Don't judge yourself for loving the wrong person. Don't feel ashamed for forgiving too much. Know that your willingness to love, to trust, to feel is the ultimate proof of inner strength that no one can take from you. And when you awaken, you don't just save yourself. You save your world. A world once manipulated by illusion, now rebuilt by the light of truth. Part 2, the undeniable moment when the heart stops lying to itself. There comes a point when you can no longer lie to yourself. Not because someone shouted at you that you're being hurt, not because a dramatic event shook you awake, but simply because things no longer align with your heart. You began to sense something is deeply off, even if you can't quite articulate it. Conversations that once felt intimate now seem hollow, as if you're speaking to a pre-written script, where genuine emotion has been replaced by subtle control. The silences between you are no longer moments of shared understanding, but tools of invisible punishment. And the eyes of the one you once loved now reflect not connection, but only themselves. You used to tell yourself, maybe they're just tired. Maybe they don't mean to hurt me. Maybe I'm being too sensitive. But one day, in a moment so small no one else would notice, a dismissive glance, a cold remark, a lack of simple humanity, you suddenly understand you're not being loved, you're being controlled. For a super empath, this is not a pleasant realization. You're not someone who rushes to conclusions. Your heart is wired for forgiveness, for seeing light in even the darkest places, but this time that light is gone. And that hurts more than betrayal itself. The truth that this person didn't accidentally hurt you. They knew, they saw, and they did it again. The truth that your suffering didn't stop them. In fact, it sometimes gave them a twisted sense of power. The truth that you've become a part of their strategy, not a part of their heart. At this stage, the narcissist still believes they're in control. They think your silence means you're waiting to make things right, that you're still adjusting yourself to be loved again. What they fail to see is that this silence marks a deep detachment. Because when a super empath stops trying to save someone, it means they've started saving themselves. You no longer argue. You no longer try to prove who's right or wrong. You no longer plead to be heard, because now you understand no one is truly listening. And in that isolation, you begin the most important conversation of all, the one with yourself. You begin to ask the questions you once feared. Why am I always the one carrying all the blame? Why does love make me feel small, exhausted, and unsafe? What have I lost by being with them, and why did I allow it? These questions don't come from logic alone, but from the weariness that's been quietly growing in your soul. And with each question, a piece of you returns. Not the old version of you, but the one you forgot. The version that can love, yet still have boundaries. That can give, but not at the cost of identity. For the narcissist, this stage is a dangerous silence. They think you've calmed down, that you're back under control. But in truth, you're waking from the spell. What unsettles them, though they can't name it, is that your energy has changed. You no longer need their praise. You're no longer seeking validation. You've stopped trying. And that calmness, to them, is the most threatening signal of all, because it cannot be controlled. Inside you, there's a quiet unraveling, not of yourself, but of the illusions they planted. You start to distinguish between real love and disguised manipulation. You begin to see the entire relationship as a map, and every red flag you once ignored now shines bright. And what's remarkable is you don't feel hatred. You don't want revenge. What you feel is sorrow, not for them, but for the version of yourself that believes so deeply you lost your way. But sorrow doesn't mean going back. Sorrow means learning, growing, and never placing your trust in the wrong hands again. From the outside, it may look like you're still in the relationship, still staying, but deep within, you walked away long ago. You don't need to declare it. You don't need to warn them, because you now understand true strength doesn't need noise, and that is the first step to freedom. Not a surface departure, but a break in awareness. The moment you stop believing in empty promises, in the cycle of sorry and repeat, and crocodile tears, that is the moment you choose yourself. The super empath doesn't walk away because they are weak. They walk away because they are finally strong enough to see. Sometimes the only way to love yourself is to let go of someone who can outlove anyone beyond the distorted self. Part 3, facing the truth. No more sugarcoating the pain. There comes a pivotal point in your awakening journey that no one can do for you. It's the moment you stop coloring over the pain. No more excuses. No more justifications. No more calling cruelty accidental or dismissing coldness as just work stress. It's the moment you stop defending the very hurt you never deserved in the first place. But for a super empath, admitting that you're in a toxic relationship is not easy. You love with an open soul. You don't just give your heart. You give your trust, your forgiveness, second chances, third chances, even infinite ones. You don't let go easily, not because you're weak, but because you've always believed in people's ability to change. But eventually, you are forced to confront the truth. What you've been calling love is no longer love. It's pain. You begin to revisit every behavior, every word, every accident you once overlooked. You begin to realize no one accidentally hurt you over and over again. No one can control their emotions, yet always finds the perfect moment to punish you. No one who truly loves you would make you continually question your worth. And then it hits you, the most heartbreaking realization of all. You weren't wrong for loving them. You were wrong for believing love could fix everything. Even a soul that doesn't want to be healed. At this stage, a super empath is no longer confused like before. The pain might still be there, but it's a pain with clarity. The pain of someone waking up in the middle of the night, only to realize they've been lying in a room that doesn't belong to them. And instead of staying still, you get up, turn on the light, and begin to clean up your life. The narcissist, meanwhile, is still playing their role, still delivering manipulative apologies, still using remorseful eyes laced with blame, still painting a tragic backstory to stir your compassion. But this time, you're no longer falling for it. Not because you've grown cold, but because you've learned to tell the difference between true repentance and a calculated performance meant to pull you back into the cycle. The biggest difference in this stage is that you no longer need a reason to leave. Before, you wanted clear proof, a dramatic wrongdoing to justify your decision. But now, only one thing matters. Your heart no longer feels safe. When the truth is seen clearly, you no longer want to save anyone. Because now you understand, they don't need saving. They need control. They need admiration. They need you to keep playing the healer so they can keep playing the wounded. But you've seen through the act. And you no longer want a part in the performance. You don't cry when they walk away. You don't search for reasons in their silence. You're no longer reacting. You've entered a state of awareness. And that is the first real step toward freedom. This change is quiet but powerful. It doesn't need words. It doesn't need confrontation, because your calm has become the clearest mirror reflecting their falsehood. They will feel unsettled. They will try to pull you back with sweetness, with remorse, with threats, but nothing can bring back someone who now sees clearly. And you, the super empath, have started to see clearly not just them, but yourself. You realized kindness doesn't mean endless sacrifice. Empathy doesn't mean tolerating abuse. And love doesn't mean forgetting yourself. The moment you stop romanticizing everything is the same moment you begin to repaint your own portrait. A person who once endured, once trembled, once feared, but never gave up. A person who may have fallen for love, but refuses to live forever in the shadows. And this is what terrifies the narcissist most. You don't leave in chaos. You leave with clarity. You don't swing fists or throw tantrums. You simply stop believing. And to a manipulator, the loss of your belief is the end of their power. It's a bitter truth to realize that the one you sacrificed everything for never truly valued you, but it's also a profound relief to understand you no longer need to wait for them to change, because from this moment on, the only person you need to change is yourself, to love yourself more, to guard your boundaries, and to never again play a game where the only outcome for you is loss. Part 4. Choosing not to be the victim, the silence that terrifies the manipulator. One of the things the narcissist is never prepared to face is the conscious silence of a super empath. Not the silence of pain, not the silence of submission, but the silence that comes from an awakened mind and a heart that no longer reacts according to the old script. And this very silence, though quiet, is the death knell for the power the narcissist once believed was permanent. In the past, whenever something went wrong, you were the one to make peace. You'd reach out, apologize, explain, or try harder to understand them, not because you were weak, but because you hated conflict, hated the rupture of human connection. You learned to carry the emotional weight of both sides as a subconscious reflex. But one day you stopped doing that. Not out of anger, but because you finally understood. You cannot keep pouring into a cup that's deliberately leaking. You no longer say, "I'm fine," when you're not. You no longer text, "Let's not fight anymore," when deep down you know you're being gaslit. You stop trying to pull the conversation back on track. Instead, you sit in stillness. You observe, and you begin to reclaim your emotional energy for yourself. This is when the narcissist starts to feel uneasy, though they can't explain why. They keep acting the same, ignoring you, being cold when you need warmth, becoming reactive when you set boundaries. But this time it's different. You don't react, you don't cry, you don't argue, you don't rage. And that is the punishment they were never prepared to receive. Because narcissists aren't truly afraid of anger. They know how to manipulate it. They want you to explode so they can call you too emotional. They need you to react because your reactions give them control. But when you stop reacting, they lose their grip. You've unplugged your emotional wire from their power game, and the darkness now falls on them, not on you. Your silence is an emptiness. It's a deliberate statement. I'm no longer playing this script. And then you start cutting out the small habits of people pleasing. You no longer try to predict their moods to prevent conflict. You no longer respond to messages immediately. You no longer force yourself to smile when you're in pain. These seemingly minor shifts are, for you, acts of reclaiming self-respect. But to the narcissist, they are signs that their ownership over a soul is slipping. They panic, but they won't show it. They'll act more indifferent, colder. Maybe they'll try one last manipulation tactic, stonewalling, silent treatment, or pretending they're bored of you. But deep down, they're shaken. They know you've begun to step outside their influence. And what they fear most isn't losing you. It's losing the ability to control your emotions. Now, you don't need them to admit anything. You don't need to hear, "I'm sorry." You don't need them to understand your pain, because you've realized not everyone is mature enough to face the consequences of the harm they cause. And not everyone deserves a place in your life. For the super empath, letting go is never easy. It comes after hundreds of sleepless nights, hundreds of typed and deleted messages, hundreds of silent tears. But because it's so difficult, when you finally do it, it becomes the highest form of victory. Not through fire, but through resolve. Your silence now is the light in the labyrinth that doesn't just lead you out of a toxic relationship, it sends a signal to your soul. I'm returning to myself. From the outside, no one may understand why the narcissist is suddenly more erratic, more insecure, but you understand, because you know they are losing their old victim and facing a version of you they can no longer control. And that's why this stage is so decisive. You're stepping out of manipulation, not by fighting, but by refusing to play. You're not retaliating. You're not seeking revenge. You're simply walking away in awareness. When you do that, you don't just reclaim peace. You reclaim sovereignty over your inner world. And for a super empath, that is more sacred than any form of revenge. Part 5, leaving without looking back. The exit is a rebirth. Leaving is not a sudden impulse. For a super empath, it is a quiet, prolonged, and deeply reflective process. There are no rushed suitcases, no slammed doors, no tears clouding the path. There's only a long-ignored voice of clarity that finally becomes the compass pointing the way. You once loved this person with every ounce of sincerity your heart could hold. You believed that with enough love and enough patience, you could reach the human part of them, the part capable of empathy, of understanding, of returning love with love. But after countless acts of forgiveness, after trying again and again to excuse their coldness or cruelty with past pain or unhealed wounds, you came to accept the truth that every super empath must face, no matter how painful. Love no matter how deep, cannot save someone who doesn't want to change. You don't leave because you stop loving. You leave because you realize that love should not mean drowning in a relationship. You leave not to hurt them, but to stop hurting yourself. Your departure requires no grand drama, no final scene, because your calmness in this moment is the liberation. For the narcissist, this was never part of the script. They were used to the cycle: hurt you, be forgiven, regain control, get caught, be forgiven again. They believed you'd stay forever, locked in an invisible cage of hope in their potential, too afraid to break the chains. They never expected that you would let go without demanding an apology, without needing closure, without asking them to understand you. And what shocks them isn't that you left, but how you left. Not with rage, not with tears, not with begging. You simply went silent. What you left behind wasn't blame, it was a void they can't fill. Not because you were perfect, but because you had once been the light that illuminated their darkness, a light they never appreciated. And now that light is gone. For the first time in a long time, they feel cold. To you, this wasn't just the end of a relationship, it was an inner rebirth. With each step away from them, you move closer to your true self, the one distorted by emotional manipulation, the one branded as too sensitive, too irrational, too needy. But now, you no longer believe those labels. You understand that your emotions aren't burdens. Your intuition isn't shameful. You are not weak. You are a survivor. Your rebirth didn't come from someone rescuing you. It came from you rescuing yourself. No one saw how many nights you questioned if you were the problem, how many mornings you woke up feeling not enough, how many fears of abandonment you silently swallowed. But now, you know. You don't have to suffer to prove you're worthy of love. The narcissist may never admit their partner's story. They might rewrite the ending, casting themselves as the victim and you as the cold one who suddenly disappeared. But you no longer need to defend yourself because you've learned that truth doesn't need to be shouted. It lives in the peace you reclaimed by walking away. And that peace, your refusal to look back, to respond to their last tricks, to be dragged into emotional chaos again, is what terrifies them the most. They can manipulate anything except the person who's seen the entire play and chosen to exit the stage. You were once a loving puppet, but now you're the author of your own script and you're not seeking them because you know that your freedom is the greatest punishment for them. Nothing breaks a manipulator faster than losing the one person who used to respond exactly as they planned. Your departure doesn't just close an old chapter. It opens a new future, one where you learn to love without losing yourself, where you choose partners based on respect, not empty promises, where you no longer sacrifice yourself to maintain a relationship that's lost its soul. You didn't just leave, you returned. Return to your intuition. Return to that inner voice once buried. Return to the whole worthy self you once gave up just to hold on to someone who never truly held you. And in that return, you find not just survival, but rebirth. Part 6, the Narcissist Aftershock, when the puppet refuses to pull the strings. If you leave, a silence settles in. Not an empty silence, but one weighted with presence. For you, the Super Empath, it is the first time in a long while that you can breathe without feeling like you need permission. But for the narcissist, it marks the beginning of an internal collapse they will never admit. They don't grieve the loss of you the way ordinary people mourn someone they love. Their pain doesn't stem from genuine affection, but from panic. Panic over losing control. You're no longer reacting, responding, or stuck in their endless loop of hollow apologies and unmet expectations. They no longer have anyone to blame, no one to absorb their emotions, and that leaves them with an emptiness so deep it's almost unbearable. What the narcissists lose is not love, it's their supply of ego reflection. When you were still there, you were a mirror in which they projected the image they wanted to see. The misunderstood soul, the victim, the special one who needed to be understood. They manipulated you into playing a supporting role in their narrative, a role you never signed up for, but were coerced into playing for months, even years. When you leave without hatred, without a fight, without spectacle, they feel as though they've been unmasked in broad daylight. There's nothing left to shield the void inside them. No one left to justify their cruelty. no one to repaint the cracks in their ego. And it's in this moment that the truth begins to echo within them, the very truth they've spent their entire life avoiding. But what happens when a narcissist cannot face the truth? They fight it with the only tools they know: denial, blame, and smearing. They may rewrite the story for others, casting you as the betrayer, the overly sensitive one, the impossible to please, the one who didn't know how to love. Because if they were to admit they lost you due to how they treated you, their fragile ego would collapse. They might come back, not because they've changed, but because they want to restore the power structure you dismantled. They may send emotional messages, call you at midnight, or accidentally appear at places you frequent. But if you look deeper, you'll see they're not seeking you. They're seeking the control they lost. They spiral in desperation to reconstruct their imaginary throne. You, the super empath, begin the sacred process of rebuilding yourself from the ruins. And this is the hardest yet most beautiful part: the internal reconstruction after manipulation. You don't heal just by letting things go. You face the most painful question: why did I allow this to continue? What wounds inside me were exploited? What did I sacrifice because I thought I'd be more lovable if I just tried harder? You enter a dialogue with yourself, a conversation you once avoided because you were too busy trying to save the relationship. Now you redirect that energy inward, rediscovering your boundaries, reclaiming your true worth, and most importantly, rebuilding your relationship with yourself. This is not a lonely journey. It is a sacred one, because with every step you take toward awakening, you free a former version of yourself, the one who endured, who tolerated, who believed they had to do more to deserve love. You learn to set boundaries, not because you've become hard, but because you've realized that love without boundaries turns kindness into self-destruction. You learn to listen to your intuition, the one that was once silenced in a world of manipulation. And most importantly, you learn to forgive, not them, but yourself. Forgive yourself for staying too long. Forgive yourself for believing empty words. Forgive yourself for sacrificing too much to hold on to something that was never real. And in that process, you don't return to who you were. You don't go back to yourself. You become someone new, stronger, wiser, and no longer vulnerable to the same old tricks. The narcissist may continue the cycle with someone else, but with you, the game is over. You've seen the truth. Not just about them, but about the parts of yourself that once colluded with your own pain. And that is where you reclaim your power. Not the power to control, but the power to be your true self, uncompromised by the need for external validation. This is the quiet victory of the super empath. Not revenge, but sovereign survival. And as you walk forward, you don't just leave behind a toxic relationship. You break free from a generational cycle of pain, years of conditioning, and countless old versions of yourself. And that is the one thing the narcissist can never reclaim. The you of today, no longer controlled, no longer trapped in their shadow. A you that has finally broken free. Call it 7, when truth becomes power and compassion becomes a boundary. There is one truth the narcissist will never accept. The super empath doesn't just leave, they evolve. And that evolution isn't merely about escaping a toxic relationship. It's an inner revolution. A complete transformation from someone who was once manipulated, self-doubting, and overly accommodating in the name of connection into someone grounded, clear, and unshakable by emotional illusion. When a super empath walks away from the narcissist world, they don't exit as a victim. They don't carry around a tragic story to tell endlessly. They don't need pity. Instead, they walk out like a survivor who has walked through fire. Part of their past burned to ashes, but their essence refined and reborn. While the narcissist scrambles to regain lost control, to find a new supply to cling to, the super empath isn't looking for a replacement. They are looking for themselves. They don't escape loneliness by jumping into another relationship. They sit with that loneliness, listen to it, and learn from the cracks within that once made them vulnerable to manipulation. The transformation of a super empath isn't a single moment. It's a series of conscious choices, choosing not to react when provoked, choosing not to return just because of longing, choosing not to forgive without true remorse, and most of all, choosing not to abandon themselves just to be loved. You see, once a super empath reaches this stage, they are no longer just someone who is hurt. They become a keeper of truth. The truth about themselves, the truth about healthy love, the truth about emotional patterns that once kept them in cycles of pain. And with every step forward in awareness, they not only learn, they become a lighthouse for others, still trapped in the fog of manipulation. Meanwhile, the narcissist, unable to feed off your pain, will attempt to rewrite the story. They may run back to an ex as a substitute source. They may smear your name to others, but they don't understand you're no longer playing the game. You've left the board. Not because you lost, but because you realized the game was never fair. And you no longer need to play to prove your worth. When a super empath no longer needs validation from the one who hurt them, they reclaim their sovereignty on the deepest level. They don't need apologies to heal. They don't need closure from anyone but themselves. And in that inner independence, they become what the narcissist fears most: a free soul, ungovernable, untouched by sweet lie. On the outside, the narcissist may appear fine. They'll post smiling photos, act like life is great. But inside, there's growing void, a space that was once filled by your energy. And now that you've withdrawn every bit of your supply, they're left with only themselves, a shattered ego, no depth, no reflection to maintain the illusion of control. Meanwhile, you, the one who once believed you couldn't live without them, are now learning to live in a completely new way. Living without needing to be understood to feel whole. Living without needing to win an argument to feel right. Living without needing to prove anything to anyone except yourself. You begin to rebuild your life with intentional choices. You reconnect with old hobbies, with passions that were once dimmed. You value peace more than the highs and crashes. You no longer need drama to feel alive. You just need authenticity and balance. A healed super empath doesn't become closed off. They don't build walls around their heart. They don't stop loving, but now they love with discernment. They love from fullness, not from emptiness. They know that kindness should never be exploited, and love should never be a reason to endure suffering. And that is what makes their return to themselves a revolution. Once and for all, they reject the role of the savior. They choose instead to be their own rescue. When they rise, they don't just walk forward. They lead. They inspire. They break generational cycles of pain. They stop, face the wound, and instead of turning away, they transform it into wisdom. The narcissist may continue searching for another victim, but they will never forget you. Because you didn't just disappear, you awakened. You didn't just survive, you grew. And from this moment on, no one can ever take back the power you reclaimed for yourself. The end, the super empath's departure is not just a personal event. It is a silent yet powerful declaration. I have seen enough, I have felt enough, and now I choose myself. No drama, no revenge, no cruelty needed. This kind of exit carries a depth that the narcissist will never understand. That when a soul that was once abused still chooses to love life, they don't just survive, they become a light for others, still lost in the dark. The truth is, you don't need to scream to be heard. You don't need to suffer to prove your love. You don't need to twist yourself into good enough for someone else's approval. All you need is to awaken, step out of the role you were forced into, and return to your true self, whole, free, and strong. And that alone is the greatest victory. Remember, the narcissist may manipulate words, rewrite stories, and even pretend to change. But there's one thing they can never reclaim: the power over your mind once you've awakened, and when you dare to take back the energy they once abused. When you choose to stand alone rather than bow in a hollow but love, you become a real threat to them because you are no longer easily controlled. You become someone who cannot be bent. This is not just the end of a relationship. This is the rebirth of someone new, a version of you that no longer lives for external validation, but from internal worth, who no longer trades peace for illusions, and who will never again return to those who treated you like a pawn in a game of control. If you see yourself in this journey, if you've ever given too much, felt too deeply, or forgiven for far too long, then this video is for you. Not to pull you back into the past, but to help you move forward with a new belief. You're not weak because you loved. You are strong because you let go. Share your thoughts in the comments below. Your story might be the key to someone else's healing. And if you found value in this video, don't forget to subscribe, turn on the notification bell, and walk with us on this journey of awakening, healing, and freedom. Because you deserve a life that's not controlled, but fully, unapologetically lived.